Nice to meet you. I'm Jake. I'm the Assistant Director at Southeast Angels. We've got 3 very experienced angels here to tell their honest stories, the good, the bad and the ugly for the next 25 minutes or so. There's a bit of a theme running through today, which I think is a collaborative day of people coming together. It's really all about helping each other and sharing your kind of honest stories of what you've been involved with and how you've gone about things. So I think we're going to carry on that energy and that kind of collaborative feel through the day, and hopefully we'll unlock some nuggets of wisdom from our panel. To introduce our amazing panelists, so we've got Andrea Sinclair. Andrea is an experienced internet entrepreneur and active angel investor. She supports female founders through the Alma Angel Group. She also received the UK BAA Angel Investor of the Year Award in 2022. We have on the end there, Joe Cross. Joe, earlier in his career, was employee number 12 at a little company you've never heard of called TransferWise. He stayed there for 8 years before leaving the company that had grown to 2,300 employees. He's now an active early-stage angel investor with a portfolio of 25 companies. He's focused on investing in companies with the potential to make a positive impact. And in the middle, we have Peter Cowley. Peter's been an angel for 15 years and has invested in 76 startups so far, resulting in 20 positive exits, including a 107x exit. He was also named UK Business Angel of the Year back in 2014 and was president of the European Business Angels Network and has written 2 books for angels, one of which is The Invested Investor, which I think you've brought with you today. There it is, and he's actually got 2 books. He's really bringing everything for you today. Peter's actually going to be signing some of these books at the end of the day, so do stick around for that. Make sure you get your copy. I'm going to start off with a question. We'd like to know, how did you get started, and what does your portfolio look like now? Let's start with you, Andrea.
Let's first see if this works. Yeah, you're all very bright, a bit like being on the beach. I basically started my angel investment journey as a sort of a follow-on from supporting social entrepreneurs. So whilst I was still working in tech startups directly, I decided to, do something positive for the planet and basically give some advice and support for social entrepreneurs. Some of those then went on to start some early impact businesses, and I put some money behind them. That quite automatically led to doing more angel investments and doing even more so once I decided that I didn't have another brilliant business idea to spend 150% of my time on. So from that, I went on to join some of the early syndicates, and there weren't many, if you think back to the early 2010s. Basically since then I've made about 60 investments in just over 50 businesses. You already mentioned that my focus is now female founders. So in the last 5 to 6 years, basically, I've very much zoomed into that. I didn't actually, often people ask me, did I have a thesis at the beginning? I have to admit I didn't. I just wanted to help other entrepreneurs and decided I didn't want to be one myself anymore. I'd rather help many others. And so I very much refocused on underrepresented founders and, most importantly for me, female founders. And I think the last thing to mention, which may come up further in our discussion, is that I've now also invested in a number of impact funds. So I'm trying to reach more entrepreneurs through those funds.
Amazing, thank you. Peter, how did you get started and what does your portfolio
look like?
Great,
so I was mentoring somebody on the course I'd done at uni, and he wanted to start something up and asked for a bit of investment. And at that point, I'd never even heard the word angel. This was about 18, 19 years ago. And during that journey, he told me I was an angel. That's interesting, I thought. And I got this my highest percentage IRR. I got 152% IRR on that, 17x in about 3 years. And then, because of that, I joined the Cambridge Angels, a group of high net worths in Cambridge. The group's been going for 23 years now, and really embraced it. So I'd been an entrepreneur for still am an entrepreneur actually. I've still got 2 businesses I run for about 40 years, or 30-something years then. As Joe's just said, I've made 76 investments and I've had 20 exits. 4 have been 0 to 1x, the other 16 have been more, 21 failures. I've got a couple of secondaries going on at the moment. That's the great thing about having a big portfolio. Stuff happens. You get an email coming in, we've gone bust. Or, hopefully, can you sign this paperwork? So my IRR's been, the mean's been 40% and the median 32%. So I've had a reasonable amount of luck, but I haven't actually done this for the money. I've done this, just as Andreas said, to help others. And I've had a wonderful time. I've mentored probably best part of 1,000 entrepreneurs over the years. I've close friends. I've just been hiking in the States, and one of the entrepreneurs came to see me there. His exit was to an American company. So it's the time I've spent with people, usually a generation or perhaps a little bit more than that, generation and a half younger than me, that's been the really big bonus out of it. I've had about 3 times my money invested back so far, and I've still got 35 investments to go.
Thank you. Joe, what about you?
So I'm Joe Cross. As Jake said, I was with a company called TransferWise from 2012 until about 2020. And I decided to leave, and basically I realized that, well, I certainly wouldn't have been the first former operator, let's say, to go into VC and investing. It's a well-trodden path, certainly in the US, less so here, but more so now. And so I started to get a little bit of outreach from VCs saying, hey, we want to chat. And because I'd left Wise, I was quite tired after the journey. It was absolutely mental, but it was great as well. I wanted to, maybe give something back to some of the founders. And I ran marketing at Wise, basically. So there was a load of stuff that I thought is in here, which I could absolutely help these people with. So I didn't actually have a plan to go, I will become an angel investor. So it started quite organically like that. Then some ex-TransferWise people were doing a startup, and they said, do you want in? And I thought, well, if I'm going to be an angel investor, I better make at least one investment. So I did, and then the ball rolled from there, basically. And so I've been doing my own personal investing, but also with Atomico, which is a large VC. So they have an angel program, which I joined. So I've sort of been wearing 2 hats. And the angel program was great because it taught me some slightly more formal ways of doing things rather than just being literally a one-man band out on my own. But also the freedom of being a one-man band on your own is great as well. So that was all since 2021, and I've made about 30 investments, a whole mix of outcomes. About half have had an up round since, which I'm pretty pleased with, given that they're all fairly new investments. About a quarter have unfortunately died, and the last quarter we shall see. But yeah, as Peter said, literally today I've had one email saying we've gone out of business, and another one saying we've just closed our seed round. Congratulations, 4x up. So that's the game.
Thank you for that. And just sticking with you, Joe, what advice would you give to new angel investors, and what are some of the important things to consider when getting involved?
So I think for me the most probably the most useful time I spent when starting out was with basically schmoozing with VCs. Like I'm sure many people have a different opinion, but I sort of thought, well, look, there's an entire industry whose function is to find the very best deals, and I'm talking about early stage stuff, by the way. And my portfolio is mainly pre-seed and seed, and so I didn't really have any deal flow myself. But loads of VCs have the deal flow, but they actually really want to speak to ex-operators who have, scar tissue from the journey and can help people who are now entrepreneurs. So it really suddenly sort of struck me that actually, okay, this is fantastic. If you have the sort of background that I have, or to be fair, any background where you can be useful to a startup, absolutely not just someone who's been part of an early team or anything like that, then in a way you can be useful to the VCs as well, because you can help their portfolio, or you can be part of their diligence maybe, or you can give them deals ideally. I mean, that's ultimately what they're looking for. So I found actually this going out really proactively, meeting lots of VCs, and then it can feel a bit transactional at times, because sometimes, you have a coffee, you say a nice thing, and then they send you a deal on WhatsApp a few days later. But it really is how I built all my deal flow in the first few days, was just that, like lots and lots and lots of meetings. With no idea whether they were going to go anywhere. And suddenly I had lots of VCs who I would sort of call friends, I guess, who were starting to send me deals and vice versa. And I don't know how you would do this without putting the time into building deal flow from zero. Because I think no matter any amount of strategy you have around your portfolio construction or whatever, it's all rubbish if the actual deal flow you have isn't any good.
Excellent, thank you. And Peter, what about you for the things to consider?
By far, I was lucky because I was based in Cambridge, and Cambridge, as you might know, is a centre of entrepreneurial for its size at least, which is 70 times smaller than London. It punches well above its weight in terms of entrepreneurial output, deep tech, stuff coming out of the university, etc. So I joined the Cambridge Angels, which is now a group of 60 high net worths. We invested about 40 million or so last year together, including some VCs who are members as well. And I learned so much from those people. So the first piece of advice is join a network if you possibly can, if you're in an area where there is a network that's suitable, because that will give you deal flow, but more importantly, it'll give you information and knowledge and experience of others, people you can follow, etc. And then, obviously, as I learnt that, I became chair and then written a couple of books, one that I showed you in another book as well. So that gives you the deal flow, gives you the knowledge. Second point is that you've got to understand your own risk appetite. Writing that very first check is not easy, because whatever background you've come from, it's a bit easier for being an entrepreneur because you're used to taking risks. But if you come from banking or law or something, then you'll never have done enough due diligence. You've just got to bite the bullet and write that check. Build a portfolio. Super important. It's a numbers game basically. Having a portfolio of 3, 4, 5, you've actually got a really good chance of losing all your money. Having a portfolio of 20, 25, which is really tough to get to, give yourself 5 years to get there, then you've got a good chance of at least getting a return that's above, getting your money back, etc. And just one other thing before I pass it on. In my view, one should write off your investment immediately. One should not get emotionally attached to it, so that when it does come back, even if it's a less than 1x, you're positive about it, because there's nothing you can do with a share certificate that's on a piece of paper that's sitting in a drawer. It's only when there's a liquidity event. And taking a secondary, I think we're going to talk about secondaries later, taking a secondary at the right time is well worth doing, rather than hanging on and finding the business has gone bust. Those are my initial views.
Thanks, Peter. What about you, Andrew?
It's a bit impossible to say my points, but anyway, I'm going to emphasize a few you've just mentioned. I mean, my number one point would basically be to find the networks you want to join and talk to them. I completely see your point, Joe, about VCs, but for many people, I think it's not necessarily so relevant. It's because they won't have the connection unless they've been in a business that has had a lot of VC investments. But things have changed enormously since when I first wrote my first checks in 2010. There are many more networks. Of course, London, there are a lot of them in London, but even outside, like Southeast Angels and others. So find your network, find your tribe, find the people you want to be investing with, and either join that or at least sort of loosely affiliate yourself to that. I think that's really important. And very importantly, we're seeing lots of collaboration happening, new initiatives, which are hopefully going to get these networks to work more together. So that's number one. The second thing, not to overemphasize, but be prepared to lose this money. Don't think you're going to be the smartest person in the room that's necessarily going to make massive returns. You can have, even if you have a really big portfolio, you may still lose this money. I think it is worth emphasizing. Unless you're planning to do this like a VC, and the VCs are about to lose money too. So, arrest my case. It is really difficult to make this work. You may be lucky. Timing is everything. We all know. We know that through founder stories where you go, well, had this business been done X years later or before, it wouldn't have worked. So don't underestimate that point. And maybe linked to that, and my learnings are, I wrote big checks at the beginning. Now, I wrote it at the time when it wasn't so common to be an angel investor. In fact, it was quite uncommon in the early 2010s. But now you can get away with writing many small checks. So why don't you do that? I think that's important. And the last point is basically think about why you're investing in that business. Is it something? So personally, I think it has to be something I care about, and even more so over the many years. Like, do I care about this problem being solved? So it doesn't have to be social impact, but just generally, do I care about this problem? And very importantly, do I think this founder or founding team has what it takes to make this work? And there's going to be many twists along the way, but do you think, how do you assess that? I think that's...
Excellent. Thank you for that. On the topic of losses, could you give me an example of when something hasn't worked out? What did it teach you? But then also, how did it change your approach to investing? and what was that feedback loop like?
Well, that fits quite, as I was reflecting on this on my way down, that fits quite well with the topic I just mentioned in terms of the founders. Do they have what it takes? So I've got a number of my early impact investments where I kind of knew those social entrepreneurs because I'd given them some support already, and then decided to back them with a bigger check. Now, at the time, I didn't have enough experience really, or didn't think about it carefully enough about, do they really have what it takes to make this work? And I did have some losses as a result of that. So, at least 2 bigger checks I wrote is I didn't kick the tires enough. I didn't think about it carefully enough, or ask them, or even as we, tried to support them along the way, make sure they were doing it in an agile enough way, really trialing and testing and changing course before too much money was spent. Now, some of these things have also changed just because you can do so much more with so much less now. So, 14 years ago, you'd have to spend a lot more, even just in technology. So you can try so many more things now. But even so, had I thought about it more, and strangely enough, I had been I'd been running and growing startups, and even so, I didn't think about it enough. The number one thing is the founder, and VCs will always tell you that as well. You're backing a team, you're backing a person.
Interesting, Peter. What about you? A loss that became a lesson.
Yeah, first of all, of the 21 losses, 21 complete failures, they're almost always because of product market fit hasn't been reached before investment dries up. So, of course, product market fit means effectively that you're generating sales, hopefully with enough contribution or gross margin, you can run the business. And if you don't get to that point and the investors lose faith in the founders, of course, the founder or founders might be kicked out, that's not that often, it's much more likely the investors say, sorry, we're not going to put any more money in. And then if the founders then go out to other capital in other areas, they're going to say, well, why aren't your current investors following on? So almost all my failures have been because product market fit hasn't been met. And that could be to do with timing, as Andreas just said. It could be due to the technology not working, could be due to competition that wasn't there at the beginning. It could be, there's all kinds of reasons. So that's of the 21, probably 19 of that. The failure I want to talk about was probably my most embarrassing failure, where I put some money in and 4 months later they went bust, even though they were turning over probably about 400K a year. And this is simply because I didn't do enough DD. I didn't get to know the investor director. And when the money went in, the investor director allowed the founders to take out their director's loan. So this took out about half the working capital we put in. They had a bad summer and then it failed. I learned so much from that particular thing. So if you ever look at my website, petercowley.org, you'll see all my investments, all my failures, successes, all my stats, and also my criteria. We haven't really come on to that, but I developed an investment criteria over the first 6 years, which I then used for several years after that. And one of those is that I get to know and understand and trust the investor director, because they're my eyes and ears to the board. Now, I have been an investor director for about 20 times, so I've done quite a few of these, but of course I can't be on every single board, every single of the 76 boards. Okay?
Thank you for sharing that. Joe, what about you?
Thank you. You dropped your paper, by the way.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes, the best bit, the failures. I do think also that given that all my investments are relatively new, 3 years, last year I did have, you actually see the human side of when a founder's dream dies, and it is horrible. It is absolutely horrible, and it really made me slow down, actually, because obviously I always knew from the beginning this is part of the game, but you sort of think of it not from their eyes quite as clearly as when they call you and say, it's happening. And also you do see some of sort of VCs showing their true selves as well in those moments. So yeah, but I do think also it is absolutely part of the game. There is no way, I think, probably, if anyone could make perfect investments, it would be you two, I would guess. So exactly, yeah. So I think basically when I first started, a typical round that I would be in would be, say, it's a pre-seed or seed or something, VCs doing maybe 90% of the round, and the last 10% is for strategic angels to join. So in most of those cases, there's already a big institutional investor. You know, the diligence has been done by a VC you trust, et cetera, et cetera. So it's quite easy to then go, okay, let's go. And it's sort of low conviction, high volume, small checks was what I was doing at the beginning. Basically, lots of small things, not really doing that much diligence, but rather using sort of other people's, trusting others essentially. And then obviously myself saying, do I believe in this? Do I like the founders? Do I believe it? Et cetera, et cetera. And, but I do think some of the failures have just been, I just didn't really zoom out and go, nah, that VC's just missed it. That company should never have been backed. It's just clearly not big enough. It can't ever get to the scale required, or the founder clearly has, and you sort of learn these things a little bit, I think, over time, but there's definitely an element of don't get overexcited about something, which I did a few times, and that's caused companies to not be great entrepreneurs. And then the second actually is slightly more specific around convertible notes that were mentioned earlier, and safes is a pretty common way that I've had been investing for a while, whereby you invest for a discount when the round is later completed, or when a large institutional investor comes in with the rest of it, and you maybe get 120% of your share value from your 100% investment. Great in theory, but two just never got the institutional round. So, in a very quick time horizon, the company just disappeared. Because they were collecting a few safes from angels, small checks before the big round, and I sort of thought, wow, what a privilege I have to get into this before anyone else knows about it. And then the round just never happened, and the company just disappeared. So that, as an instrument, I'm really skeptical of now. I do like the round to be priced fully, and for there to be, everyone's in, and then to know that company has runway for years. Because essentially that, when you're just doing a bunch of safes, you don't have runway for years. So, yes. Okay,
interesting. Peter, I just want to come to you for a second. We talked about kind of due diligence and trying to spot what the quick failures might be and which ones are actually going to be worthy investments. Talk me through your due diligence process. What are you looking for? What are you trying to catch out, or what are the ticks that you go through in the due diligence process?
Yeah. Can I just do a quick plug my third book, which you mentioned, which is... Sorry, I've been an entrepreneur for many years and a sales guy, so this is my sales... So it's called Public... and an author, Public Success, Private Grief. You've heard about some of my successes, but I've had a lot of terrible things happen to me. I've got late-stage cancer, luckily being kept alive and well by a daily tablet from AstraZeneca. I've also, and this is pretty shocking, I've lost 2 children. And yet, despite all that, I've somehow grown from that and coped. And this book I wrote with my wife, released it a few months ago, and there will be some of these available at the end of the session today. Sorry to change it like that, but let's just talk about let's answer the question now. For a long time, and it probably isn't my phrase, but I've used it, I invest in people with a plan, not a plan with people. So it comes back to what everybody said on this panel, it's the people. It's doing due diligence on those people, making sure that their background they're not lying about their background's sufficient, that they know enough, that they can execute on their dream. Because if you're doing early stage investing, and most of mine is very early stage, what used to be called seed, now of course called pre-seed, is that you're investing in the ability of the founders to execute on their dream. And their dream is the plan, the 12-page, 15-page PowerPoint. So looking at their background, taking some reference on them, etc., is by far the most important thing. Whatever amount of due diligence you do, it will not be enough. It can't be enough because it takes years to get to some sort of positive exit. I mean, in my field, it's 10 to 12 years for a good B2B exit in the UK. It would probably be less in Boston and certainly less in California. And so there's all kinds of things can happen in that time. I've had about nearly 40 founders leave businesses. That makes a difference, doesn't it, when that happens? So, so the other 2 things are, one, when you're doing due diligence, proportionality of the risk must be thought about. This means working out whether the fact that they've got a bug in a spreadsheet in their forecast was really important or not. Probably not, because the forecast will be wrong anyway. But if they lie about I've got a founder that I actually still know who said he had a good exit. That good exit was a insolvent failure. It doesn't take long to work that out by going onto Companies House. You know, this sort of thing, just dig into their past. And finally, just a little thing, again, it didn't come from me, it probably came from David Rose or something. You've got to bear in mind when an entrepreneur stands up in front of you, particularly if they've been through an accelerator, they've been, their pitch has been practiced, they're actually really good. You really feel engaged and that you can invest in this person. And then as you do the DD, disillusionment sets in. As you gradually work stuff out, it gets worse and worse and worse. And you'll only invest if it's above zero, the disillusionment, when you actually get there. It's a tough game.
Thanks for that, Peter. I'm actually we're gonna have to finish soon, unfortunately. I could ask you questions for hours, but I do want to finish on something that's a bit more action oriented in terms of people are sat here today wondering, okay, like, what can I access to start on this angel investing journey? What resources, what networks, who should I talk to? What worked for you and what should other people do?
Well, clearly people need to read a book, so... And we've only just met, by the way, so, but I'm a fast learner. Anyway, I learned a lot by doing, and I just said, you know, anybody can read a subscription agreement. Anybody can kind of kick the tires on things. You shouldn't be put off by only because I haven't seen it before. I can't look at it and ask even stupid questions. So I think that's an important thing to remember. You don't have to be an expert. But the good news is that now there is so much more information available. And I'm just going to list a few things. I mean, there's obviously, looking at the stage here, the UK Business Angel Association, which has a lot of important information. There are the angel networks. Quite a few have freely available information, including actually Southeast Angels and the Future Angels initiative Christina started. So there's a lot out there. You know, Alma Angels, C Ventures you may have heard of, and many more. There's also some of the new platforms trying to support the investment process, like Odin, which supports the SPVs. Founders Catalyst is a new one. So there's quite a lot out there if you just want to educate yourself. And even if you just looked on LinkedIn, there's some quite prolific people who post very short frameworks, which are highly useful. So I think it's much easier to learn, but don't underestimate the kind of just learning by doing, and be prepared to look at stuff. I know lots of us follow others, but do look at some of those key documents, and particularly in the early phases when you can't read them, you're just not as familiar, do bother taking the time to read it because you'll learn so much.
And really quickly, Peter and then Joe.
Yeah, I can't really add much to that. I read David Rose's book. He's a New York angel. Simon Ackland, some of you might know. But 15 years ago, it was really much more difficult, just as Andrea is saying. There's so much more out there. There's also so much more out there for the entrepreneurs. They're more likely that the negotiation nowadays over price and terms and conditions is much more difficult, which is right, because there should be a power balance between the entrepreneur and the investor. And of course, that changed dramatically when investors, there was too much capital around 3 or 4 years ago. But much more importantly is people. It's, spending time with people who've done it before, following them, learning from them, following them both in terms of the process and also in terms of what they invest in. And join a group. I'm not just saying this for Christina's sake, clearly. Joining a group made a massive difference to me. And I see Jenny's turned up as well. Is that Jenny? Yeah. So UKBAACO, you'll hear from her later. Oh, and the final point, there's another author talking later, Richard Hargreaves. He's got a great book as well.
Joe.
Did you get a commission for that?
This isn't a book club, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that
the last thing I read?
Sorry,
was not much to add specifically, other than to say the people I know who are in Alma Angels absolutely love it, and Ventures Together is another group that I hear very good things about. So there certainly are plenty of options for groups, but I think the whole sort of, well, as Peter said, it's all about the people. Yes, for sure. And in my experience, how that manifests is really, if you sort of go in going, I want to invest now, who can I invest in? That as an attitude is going to close doors. Whereas if you go, I just want to meet people who are interesting entrepreneurs and may one day have a company that I could invest in. That's basically how I approach things. And then it means you can, yes, it sort of costs you time, but you can go and give a company an hour session on how to launch some marketing tests and things like that. maybe nothing comes of it, but perhaps when that company then goes and raises their next round, you're the first person they call as an angel. So I do think it's also, when you're out looking for deals, it's not necessarily, you're not just looking for deals, you're maybe looking for deals that might manifest down the line.
Excellent, thanks so much. That has brought us to the end. I have two things to say. One is, Peter will be signing books at the end of the day. Do get yours signed. And lastly, please give it up for our amazing panellists.